Ciara?
Hey.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to today's chat in our virtual festival campus for Carlow Arts Festival as part of Woman in the Machine in association with Visual. And I'm really delighted to welcome you all here for this conversation today, joined by the amazing Jenn Kirby and the equally incredible Jennifer Moore, both artists who we have worked with as part of the festival. So I'm going to start by maybe asking both of you. You can hop in, whoever wants to go first. The ubiquitous question, the one that we all get asked all the time, those of us that are kind of, I suppose, bricolage or portfolio type artists, what the hell is it that you do? Who are you? How do you describe yourself? What's, you know, put yourself in a box for the rest of us.
Sorry, do you want to go first, Jen, or will I?
Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Jennifer, and I am an artist. I identify mostly with the term artist and also musician. Work kind of across disciplines and in various ways, but predominantly with sound and in kind of like an art context. I I'm kind of an emerging artist, I guess. I know you probably can't tell from my avatar, but I definitely haven't been practicing professionally as an artist for more than 5 years, I'd say. That's all. I make music, and I am involved in, I guess, a number of different projects that include mediums like writing, research, performance. I use my voice a lot within my music, and I guess I'm also I could be called like an electronic producer. So yeah, a lot of various identifiers. And
A lot of
yourself,
hats.
Jen? A lot of hats. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a little similar. That's wear a few different hats. So I write music for instruments as a composer. So make dots on paper, that kind of stuff. I write a lot of, maybe a bit more recently in the last few years, I write a lot of cheesy pop songs, and such a fun practice. And if anyone listening is tempted to be writing cheesy pop songs, please get into it and tell me how you get on. I've also got really into, in the last year, doing improvised songwriting, which has been such a fun practice as well. So they're kind of, I think I do quite a few different things. So as I said, kind of instrumental work where it's handing a score to performers, writing some pop songs that exist in kind of that digital format. And I also do something called live electronic music, which is where that you take instruments and you process them live through by making software and kind of primarily designing hybrid musical instruments. So that means I use a lot of games controllers actually, and either hack them or find a way to get them to work as a musical instrument. So take the data from that and use it as musical parameters. So that might mean like using that to take the voice input and to be able to move with controllers like a Wiimote or some other kinds of controllers as well. But the Wiimote is kind of one that you see used quite often. So be able to take that and manipulate those components, those sound components that come from the instrument and come from the voice in real time. So I'm really excited about designing those instruments to work in new ways and kind of challenging is what I think about as an instrument as well. So that's kind of where a lot of my practice kind of sits. I do a lot of collaborative work, love collaborations actually, and I'm also quite my artistic practice maybe, but sits alongside it certainly. I'm also a lecturer in music, and I also do kind of conference organizing as well. So when you meet different people, it depends on, as you say, which kind of hat you're wearing at any one time. But they're the kinds of types of things that that occupy my time.
Yes, thank you both.
Wow.
Jennifer's, when I was reading up about you both, the thing that really struck me in terms of, you know, your own writing about your work was your association with the body, and you both articulated very clearly in your writing your interest in the body, in the human body in particular, and also you know, how that impacts your work and how you create work. I mean, it's interesting just listening to you, Jen, talking about making musical instruments, and you know, we obviously had a pre-chat about this, and I'm some interesting things I think to share with our audience about fitting into particular bodies. But thinking it other than that, you know, Jennifer, when I was looking at your work, you were talking about being interested in relationships between bodies and in the way bodies are interconnected and situated within a constellation of ever-shifting global relations, past and present. So you're bringing in kind of temporal stuff and time. So bodies and time is like it's the biggest topic in the universe. And
Yeah.
we only have a small amount of time, but considering they're things that you both were really, you know, front and center in describing in your own writings, I'd be really curious to hear from you both about it and your thoughts are, and your thinking and your work, how it intersects with all that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great intro, Joe. Like I really agree, they're such vast topics, but I mean, maybe I could just talk a little bit about how I became, I guess, involved in music making and how I started experimenting with sound first. So I originally did a BA in visual art in NCAD in Dublin, which is the National College of Art and Design, and primarily interested in video and moving image. So that was what I began doing there. And I was doing a project about Dublin Port, and I decided to, because it was so sonically interesting as a space, I decided to try and structure editing around the different patterns and cycles of noises and sounds that the various machinery located around the port were kind of making. I kind of started to see them as like large instruments, and was doing that project, which kind of ended up making a sound installation about. Was my first intro to recording sound, recording, field recording, outdoors, and kind of building what I saw the project as, like a musical project. So building music through these recordings, and really enjoying listening that I was doing with that project in the port, and moving around to the different parts of Dublin Port. So that was my first musical project, and then from then on I realized that skills I kind of gained through doing that, I could kind of use any type of sound or sample as a musical instrument. I'm kind of interested, Jen, in the fact that you not only build your own instruments, but then you also perform, because to me they're like the instruments I use at the minute are the bass, a synth I have, and my voice. That's what I'm working with at the minute on a project I'm doing. So I find it really, I'm in awe of the fact that you make your instruments and then also do the work of actually creating music with them as well. It's really impressive.
Well, I don't know if it's that impressive, but it is quite an involved process. I have been interested in the body for quite some time, and just increasingly so. I'm just more and more interested all the time. So one thing, to give an example, if I hand you a violin, you know, you have to move to respond to the shape of that. And you have to move to, your body has to change to adapt to that violin because it's this fixed structure. Whereas when we use like gaming controllers or other devices like sensors and things, we're not limited by those fixed structures at all. And that means that not only can we design brand new instruments that have never, and we can, you know, get rid of all the ways in which we have thought about that before, as well as borrow so much from that world. In addition to that, we can also design things that are individual to a person, not just a synth that is for a DJ or a violin for a violinist, but actually for an individual person. And that's so exciting for me. And I mean, I kind of got into it got into that level of it almost by accident, because I do it laptop orchestra stuff. So so that means like you're designing instruments that are to be performed by not just yourself. And through that, I kind of realized, I learned a lot about how different people move, and what I have assumed was, you know, how everyone thought about things. Like, you have to start thinking about, you know, if you're dealing with, I'll use the violin example again, or maybe I'll use a flute for a minute. So if we're talking about a flute and you want to control like volume, then you simply just blow harder, right? Okay, I'm simplifying the flute, so I'm sorry for any flautists listening. But if you are dealing with like an electronic instrument that you're designing, well, you can actually decide how you would control that volume. So for me, it made perfect sense that it was, you can't see my arms moving, unfortunately, but it is that on the left side, my left arm goes across my body from left to right. Like, that made perfect sense. That is, to me, that is so obviously where volume is, right? But of course, that's not the case. That's just an intuitive response to how I would want to move. So I found that really interesting when you work with different people, that they will want to move in a different way, that will make sense to their bodies in a different way. And I find that deeply fascinating. I've designed things, so that has meant that when I'm designing something for example, a flute and electronics, it usually means I have to buy a flute and learn basics of a flute to be able to understand the physicality involved in that. It's a bit of an expensive process having to buy, and also a timely process, you know, or a lot of time dedicated to it, to work in that way. But I learn so much from that every single time. What I found then is,
And
even
so
when I, sorry, Jennifer.
Sorry, I'm just so curious. So you build the digital instrument that can be played for an individual's body through their movement? So you would build, say, the flute specifically like for one player.
So that, sorry, that wasn't super clear. What I mean is kind of extending instruments, so processing them live. So for example, if someone is already playing a flute, then I might put a sensor on their arm, or they might use a game controller that's hacked to work in this way. And then I'm taking their movement as data. So the movement turns to data, and then I try and turn that data into music. So you're looking at the movement that's involved with playing a traditional instrument, and seeing how you can use that movement that already exists, or add in additional movement to be able to control all these other things and extend on that instrument. So like, there's certain things, if you were holding a flute, then that you would have to stay in a particular position, right? You know, so you couldn't really ask the person switch from left to right, because that's not how you play that instrument. But you probably can ask them to move their body from left to right, or bend down, and you know, there's movement that can be involved and movement that they can't really do. So I found that quite interesting, to, even if you design it in that way and you give it to one person, what's still, even in that semi kind of restricted manner, what's intuitive for one person's body is not intuitive for another person's body. So I find that really exciting, to be at a place with technology, actually, that we can design things for individuals. And it's totally against the idea of anything mass produced, actually. And it's kind of, it's a real DIY approach as well. but it's also about a one-to-one relationship rather than a one-to-many, rather than creating one thing to be used by many people, but actually seeing, what about if we just make something that works for just one person, which I know isn't a very good commercial idea, but it's something that I really, really enjoy.
And Jenn, you said in a conversation that we had that kind of reminds me of what you're talking about here now, about sound suggesting movement and movement suggesting sound. And Jennifer, I know that you've worked as a DJ, and would you tell us a little bit about that kind of the movement and sound and the music that you create and the generation of connection with audience through that? Maybe you could talk to that a little bit for us.
I haven't been in a space, so DJing to an audience or for a space or an audience in over a year. So I really miss the experience of that. Obviously, I think like the concept of being a DJ is it's can mean so many different things to many different people. Again, there's just so many types of ways of DJing, of functions for DJs, and I guess just different communities that I don't know, just that it means many things to many different people. So when I did DJ, it was really something that came out of a kind of a joy of exploring different music. I didn't come from a music background. I haven't studied it. I haven't my family are not particularly musical, so I was just my own experience of finding music really came through digging online for years when I was kind of younger, and that was kind of like many young people, people in their 20s. Like the internet is such a big part of musical experience, early musical experience. So DJing for me initially was just a way to play with all the different some of the music that I was finding, some of it that I was buying, some of it that I was downloading illegally initially in those early years, and yeah, it was again a way of trying to understand more about music, because I wasn't somebody who I before my 20s I never played an instrument or anything, so for me that was a kind of a way to play with sound, to try and understand more about it was through mixing and DJing different tracks, and again different interfaces like Ableton and other editing software can kind of allow you to layer different tracks, different songs. So yeah, I mean, that kind of my experience of DJing moved from being something that was very solitary and something that was just really curious, kind of just I don't know, yeah, solitary practice and very amateur kind of practice, became through I guess sharing like mixes online when I was younger. It became like a gateway for me to meet lots of musicians, meet lots of music producers, other DJs, people. Through my use of the platform SoundCloud when I was younger, that was kind of where I found actually a lot of producers in Dublin and began to actually build relationships with people who I would otherwise have never met, really through SoundCloud first and foremost, and then through going through, as I got older, kind of actual music venues and DIY spaces. When I was in college, there was a space that was open. It just closed recently, but it was been there for many years, a DIY space called Jigsaw in Dublin, and that was one of my one of the first places in Dublin that I really felt I don't know, the magic of DJing. There was my friend Koch, who still works as a DJ, and she was the first person I'd seen play there. And yeah, I mean, it's, to me, like my experience in music, my background in music is really informed by seeing people DJ, by being in a space where, with many others, where, you know, one person is kind of navigating the atmosphere and the journey of the musical journey of the night. But there are so many people involved and affecting that also, and they're all around you, and you're affecting one another as well through your own, and you know, your own response and enjoyment and dancing. So it was, yeah, that's how I got kind of involved and more involved and hooked in that realm of, in that way of sharing music, which in that space was very informal. Like, it was very it didn't have the kind of the official, some of the parameters that come with like more official venues. So
We've another DJ in the audience there, Ms. Kate Butler, who
oh wow,
who's,
Kate! Oh my God!
You don't recognize her with her
Kate.
green face, but
no, not at all.
It's great.
Oh,
I've been working on the
amazing.
edit of the film that three of you actually have contributed music to, so I'm very much looking forward to sharing that with you guys very shortly. But you talking about DJing reminds me of my billion years ago rifling through old record shops. I was living in the States and in South America, finding all sorts of fantastic funk and soul things in the back rooms of buildings that, you know, had been, like, I remember going to a Fania Records, which was a big record company in South America, in Venezuela, and like getting, like, basically buying their whole back catalog. And it was before Aer Lingus used to have before they used to have restrictions on what you could bring home. So I brought 10 boxes to America and then brought them a few years later on home. So it's a little different now. But you know, I kind of skipped CDs actually. I went from records straight to the illegal and then legal downloads. It was just CDs just always annoyed me. I hated the little plastic box. We're going to hear some of Jenn's music actually shortly. We're going to go up into the Braun site, the former Braun site, with the one in the machine. They'll go glaring down at us in beautiful green behind Jenn there shortly. We don't have the opportunity to hear your music right in the space, Jennifer, just because of the load. We've had Ciara del Grosso, who's our amazing designer, has managed to squash incredible things into this space. But I think no, I think that one track might just have tipped us over the edge, so we have to be careful. But where can we hear your music? We can go off and do our own research afterwards.
Well, there's the album that I think is featuring in the show, as part of the show online, is the album Future Lights and Archetypes, and that was released on a label called Coiscéim last year in 2020. So that album is kind of like a concept album. I wouldn't pick out any individual track, more so than I feel like they all kind of speak to each other. And it's, I guess,
you don't mind that I did pick out a track, do you? We picked out
Oh no, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, Phonowalia is it's like like homesickness, like the general idea of the album is well, yeah, sure. I mean, I won't actually outline that before anyone listens. So if anyone else wants to, make up their own.
Beautiful. I highly recommend people listen to it. But I think we could ramble up the green ramp now and have a wee look inside the former Braun building. And Jennifer, or Jenn, sorry, I'd love if you would basically, you know, maybe throw us into the middle of your install, let us have a wander around, and then maybe chat to us afterwards. How does that sound?
I'm so sorry. A bit of that cut out. Could you repeat that?
Oh yeah, we're gonna go hear your installation basically. So maybe we'll go and have a listen and then have a chat and can pick up the conversation inside in Braun, and people can have a wander afterwards. Good. Will we zip on over?
Yeah, lovely.
Oh, lovely.
Follow me.
Let Joe lead the way.
We're going to step through the magic portal into Braun site for Woman in the Machine. Hey.
Oh God. Okay.
For some reason, I can't put on my megaphone anymore. Would you mind sticking on my megaphone? I'm going to head on
I
in.
think
Sure. Is it not working? Will I grab a mic on the way?
Oh, yeah, there you go, Joe.
Oh. Okay, cool. Let's go first. Okay, Jen, we'll follow you.
I'll try not to walk into a wall then.
Saying we'll follow
Cool.
you, and I've run on ahead.
No, well, you said follow you, and I just ran into a wall, so it was good that you didn't follow me, actually.
It doesn't hurt, at least. At least it doesn't hurt us in the virtual space.
No, it didn't. Yeah, this maybe if I just briefly explain, it's quite an interesting thing making something for VR. Actually, this was my first time doing an audio installation for VR, and so thank you, Joe, for the opportunity, and thank you, Ciara, for being so supportive and giving me lots of advice around that. So the nice thing about doing this is you can create lots of different files. So there's actually 8 audio files surrounding that. So if you walk around in the space, you'll hear the kind of composition, I guess, change from different perspectives. So I might stay out here and allow you to do that.
I'm just thinking we should all mute our mics when we go in, otherwise it gets like the worst feedback loop in 360.
Yeah.
Smart. Maybe we should have made that the piece.
Before we go in. Okay.
Legacy is not lost. you have inherited from the women who came before you, but you inherited nonetheless.
Close your eyes and lift up your arms. I love you. I love you. I love you. Close your eyes and lift up your arms. I love you. I love you. I love you. Machine.
Jennifer? Oh, you're doing lovely faces. You know, it's back again.
Yeah, sure, sounds good. Yeah, it'll loop around, so wherever you want to step out to.
And Christina, I just need you to open your megaphone again, if you don't mind. Okay. Okay, Jen, talk to us. Are you on megaphone as well? Are we all back on megaphone, Christina?
I am now. Thank you, Christina.
Deadly.
So, yes. God, I get a little bit nervous talking about my work actually, but I can talk about it in a bunch of different ways. So, so how about you tell me if any of those ways would be interesting? Is there a particular aspect of it, or process, or kind of ideas, or anything that you'd like me to speak about?
I suppose, I mean, it is really striking how, I guess, new this is really, you know? I mean, I'm working on another virtual reality project with people at the moment, and you know, just starting to figure out how sound works in a virtual space. And between yourself and Christine, or between yourself and Ciara, you've been into this space, and within a world, you've created your own world that has a visual impact that really allows us to have a feeling like as if we are in a physical installation with 8 speakers. And I just think, well, first of all, kudos for that, because that's kind of an extraordinary thing, and it's so enjoyable just hopping around and hearing the work from different angles, and just
Thanks.
getting kind of drilling down into one speaker, or in your imagination where one speaker is. So I'm just wondering, maybe talk to us about challenge, like, you know, we were initially talking about this being an installation, a commission that was an installation of physical space, and then suddenly you're handed in a virtual space. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that. That could be interesting given the context we're in.
Yeah. So I guess it is worth kind of stating as well that I guess for most people, but certainly for me, the medium is really, really important. So it kind of, you know, just because of the nature of things this year, it kind of jumps around to being in a few different possibilities, which in one way makes it really exciting because it really forces you to think about what's the really core idea here and how can that be communicated in a lot of different ways. So that's quite a cool thing. There's I'm certainly a sound person more than a visual person. I really don't trust my own visual aesthetic very much. So I was very glad that Ciara actually came up with the kind of the dome or the cone kind of idea there to highlight it, which I think is really nice because it illuminates kind of a sonic space, and it's not invasive in any way to that. It doesn't suggest too much. So I thought that was really quite nice. it's interesting that I've done, you know, octaphonic installations before, which is just a fancy way of saying you put 8 speakers around in a circle, and you make music for that, and that becomes an instrument in itself. So, and it's definitely the same for this, but and I would have different configurations for that, like depending on how you might want to do things. And what I found interesting was that one of this kind of standard speaker configuration that I might use didn't really work when we brought it in here first. I was like, oh, it didn't have the same effect. So I kind of had to remind myself it is a virtual space. Like, it's not going to behave the same as a physical space, and sound won't be the same. So it did require quite a few tweaks, I think, to get that to work. And then of course the other but actually not having the speakers physically present is really great in some ways. In one way it was, oh, what are we going to do? Because people aren't going to know where the speakers or where sound is coming from. But then but if you were in a physical space, you might be thinking, oh, we have these big speakers, I wish we could hide them, and you'll run into problems with blocking audio if you do that. So it's quite, like, while some of the things might be advantages, there are disadvantages in other aspects, which again just makes it the more kind of interesting challenge, I think. I had tried this out, like building a little Mozilla hub to do this as well, and the problem with that was that the files weren't in sync, you know, so I'm really glad that mostly the files are in sync here, so that's kind of a useful thing. So the other kind of big thing is that if you're running this off a machine in a place, you know, you're probably not worried about the size of your files, you know, but actually that's really, really crucial here. And so it's not just for my work in this space, but that's, I'm guessing, been on Ciara's mind a lot, like developing this whole world. So that was, then it's also thinking about, you're making something, how is that going to work when you actually really reduce it to as small kind of file sizes as you can. So all of those things just become part of that compositional process, I think. But I think it's really exciting, some of the things that you can do, especially the movement that you have, because actually we could all walk around that space, but typically in a concert format of this, everyone would just be sitting down, and you would have your location, and you would be this close to that speaker and this close to the other speaker, and you wouldn't get to move around. So that's something that makes it more interesting as well here, that you can go really far back, and I found that interesting to think, oh, I actually forgot about some of those sounds because they got masked by like layers and layers of other things. So there's some like hidden things, or some little things in there that are probably more interesting for me. Like there are sounds of like Braun toothbrushes in there to make up that composition, and there are sounds of that that one of your colleagues recorded in the Braun space as well. So all those files actually go into that. So while it's not in the physical space, it's actually bringing that Braun building into this virtual space in a few different ways.
Amazing. I'm going to just ask you to talk a little bit about space and about public space. Jennifer, I might come back to you. The project that you're involved in called the Ecliptic Project, and just we're in a kind of a public space here. We have made work in the public space, in the virtual realm. We as the festival and with visual are making work in the public space. You know, currently in the real world in some respects. But I'm interested maybe to just tie all that together, Jennifer, just with your experience of work in the public domain, because I think you've got a very interesting take on it and some of the work that you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, well, I've kind of some of the work. So basically, the Ecliptic project that you just mentioned is a project that I guess has grown out of a sense of frustration that I shared with a number and numerous people shared, but myself and a group of artists, musicians, writer friends were, you know, we were kind of realizing that a lot of the project work we were developing was in response to the sense of frustration with living in Dublin. I mean, a lot of these issues that are surfacing at the minute, with, you know, I guess just experiencing restrictions to space, whether that's living space for, you know, renting as your home, or public space, or space to rent in terms of studio, if you have an art practice, writing practice, space, public space, different amenities, a lot of restrictions that are in place with regard to space, and I guess our experiences with that as artists. So we over time, I guess, came up with an idea, over time, over the last 2 years, to try and develop some sort of newsletter calendar that connects different artists across the city to share their work. Now, at the time, it was pre-COVID when we originally kind of came up with this idea, but to share their information about their work, where it was happening in different parts of Dublin, the time, the space, or the place, and then I guess as a way to kind of strengthen the support network for artists, because I mean, he explicitly kind of stated in beginning this project that this project was, you know, in response to these issues. So I guess the idea was to kind of to turn up and to try and be present and find ways that outside of Instagram, outside of Twitter, or those kind of those networks of communication, that we could end up sharing experiences, space, and time together, and support each other's work, and try and build community, and try and kind of build experiences of connection between different communities and different types of artists around Dublin. So I mean, the project began, again, like, it's really hard to start a project like that and then to expand it outside of your own buzz of artists, arts contacts or practitioners, you know. But the aim of the project is to try and begin on this administrative newsletter, and hopefully over the years, if we do the administration well, it would become a kind of a project that could be sustained by lots of different people, so that we could lead this project and other people could take the reins with it over time, and that it could actually grow in that way. So I guess that it was less to do with us artists and centering our work, but more so trying to initiate something, an infrastructure, through the newsletter and calendar. So yeah, I mean, I've been learning lots about administration through the project, and how
the wonderful thing about the arts, isn't it? How much we learn about administration.
Yeah, it is. But it's also, yeah, it's really important, because I think a lot of like networks, like social media networks, give the illusion of action, and give the illusion of kind of I don't know, I guess of being a great infrastructure, or providing a lot of important resources, when there's incredible value in trying to build those in a kind of more DIY way, like, and actually focusing on how that happens.
Legacy is
yourself.
not
So
written.
I mean, something I'm always thinking of with this project is, you know, how do we make this into something that really works in a way that a lot, like, opens kind of doors between different groups of people, between different communities of people. And I think that's something that public space is really important for, is that it's kind of space where that can happen, hopefully. Obviously there's lots of ways that public space you know, excludes some and welcomes others as well, but
arguably this is one that excludes some and welcomes others as well, and we had a discussion around that yesterday. But I mean, if this, for example, this virtual space has been created now, and last night we had Michelle Doyle, an artist, in here, and we went into We went into the disco over there, which is great fun altogether, listening to some music, dancing on her installation, which she was thrilled by. And she was like, gee, can we do a gig in here? I was like, wouldn't that be amazing? I messaged Ciara during it, and I said, yeah, it's not going to happen. Don't worry, we're not going to try and make a gig happen immediately. But I do think spaces, you know, like spaces thrill me, like virtual spaces, site-specific spaces. They thrill me personally much more than purpose-built spaces. You know, I just think that they have a lot more potential to them, and they certainly, you know, attract an entirely different audience than the usual arts audience, which is always fantastic. Listen, guys, I'm going to open it up to the floor now because we're 45 minutes in and we don't want to sit with our headsets on too long, or we'll be giving ourselves headaches. So, wondering if anyone would like to say anything or throw anything into the mix, or just say hello before we move on to the next phase of the evening.
I have a question there for Jenn Kirby. Do you have any intention to move this installation into the real world of any phase? Because it is quite interesting, and I just kind of like the idea of something that started as a physical thing, converted into a virtual thing, and then ended up being a physical thing again. It would be quite an interesting project.
Yeah. Well, there is currently three versions of this. Like one, well, I mean, potentially four actually. The fourth one wasn't exactly finished. So one of them is this octaphonic virtual installation. There is a separate version. It just works slightly differently musically. That is an octaphonic installation for a physical space. And then there's the headphone version. But then there's another. I had been working on this other binaural kind of headphone version, which gives you a really big sense of the Braun space. Actually, it got a bit too warehousey, maybe a little bit at points, and I probably needed to readjust. So the music kind of needs to change based on the space that it's in. I think a lot.
Yeah.
I think the kind of the density of the sounds works really interestingly in here, and it's a bit all encompassing on headphones. But I think it would be fit for physical. So yeah, it would be interesting to try that out. I'd be more curious about what are those changes that need to be made. You know, what does that mean?
Would you
Like
make
that's the stuff that makes me quite excited
interesting.
actually. Yeah.
The headphone piece is called in visual at the moment. Is that the binaural version? Is it, Jenn?
Yeah, there was two different versions that I was working on, so I gave you the one that works. So, there was another one that I had kind of these different ambitions for, and I went, oh my god, yeah, it's maybe there was so interesting stuff to it, but it might have taken another quite another bit of time actually to get it working. But it kind of probably
There was people in
Sorry?
visual putting on headphones over the weekend, so it's certainly working. They weren't running away.
Yeah, oh cool.
Pulling their headphones down. So
nice, that's brilliant.
great.
I wanted to ask Jennifer a question actually, if that's okay.
Yeah.
That, I really enjoyed listening. Joe sent on one of your tracks that's used for in this project the other day. I really enjoyed listening to it, and I think I might have already told you that I'm a bit obsessed with vocal production. So yeah, so I was wondering if you would be interested in kind of discussing some of your kind of production or how you went about making that piece.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a real DIYer. Like I use Ableton, and I use like an SM57 mic, and I recently bought just the last one, my first vocal kind of like processing piece of equipment called the Eventide H9, which was a big investment for me. But usually I just do vocal processing through Ableton, really just using EQing and different effects, like pre set essentially effects. It's something I'm always like learning through I guess through recording in Ableton, and I think I'm quite informed by in terms of my interest in vocal processing. I really definitely informed by certain types of pop music, and then also more like trance music as well, from like certain vocals from trance music, and yeah, I don't actually use any kind of, I haven't before used hardware, like any kind of hardware. I really enjoyed listening to your Popped album.
Oh no.
That's the name of it, isn't it? Popped? Yeah, I really enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
really cheesy.
Yeah, but it's brilliant. Like, it's
Deprecating
really,
ladies, you're fabulous.
yeah, I listened to it like twice earlier. But yeah, I love, I mean, I think you were mentioning that you write about, or you definitely think about the female vocal, or I don't know, you mentioned it briefly in our pre-chat, I think, female vocals.
Well, it's one thing that I like kind of heavily explored, I guess, in this piece as well, just that how you treat, like, you know, in production it's just called like treatment of vocals or whatever, and how you treat that, it suggests something, and it kind of goes back to even some of the talk yesterday evening about this idea of like technology isn't neutral in any way, and it's the same kind of thing, I think, that comes into just even something like vocal production in popular music, and how you treat vocals, it suggests how it's heard, actually. So you derive different meanings from, depending on the treatment of that. So there's lots of fragments in this that I could have, and normally probably would have, recorded multiple different versions of them, but I made an effort to record the one version of it and then to treat it differently, to have it suggest different meanings. So as you listen, it kind of, it makes me really aware of then how I'm listening, and why I'm listening in that way, and why do I hear something different from that treatment versus the other treatment, when I know it's the exact same thing recorded and I'm the one who recorded it. So, you know, even in itself, I find that really quite fascinating. And, you know, then, I mean, that kind of can really go down some rabbit holes with that. So even AI voices and things like that, and what that means. And there's a movement as well to have, there's a genderless voice called Q, that was created, that it basically centers around a frequency that is, it's not, it doesn't sit evenly with, like, you don't immediately think of a male voice or a female voice. It sits around a frequency spectrum that kind of broadens that out. So it's apparently kind of, it sounds genderless as a result. So that, I think that stuff is really quite interesting, as well. So even with my treatment here, I was kind of intentionally trying to use a wide kind of frequency spectrum, to, sorry, that's a really technical way of putting it, just make the voice sound different, is kind of really what I mean, and make it sound, you can interpret it in different ways. That was a very long-winded answer, sorry.
That's cool. I want to let Kate in, and then, because she wants to ask a question or say something, and then I just want to suggest that we, even though there's hardly anyone with hands operating, because well, my battery's gone down, whatever, we finish up in the disco, and we can headbang. That's all we can do. We can headbang in the disco after. Okay, Kate, hiya.
Hi, Joe. Thanks a million. Thanks to everyone. That was just so great and interesting to hear both of you talk about your practices. And one of the things I'm really interested in is when women are producing, making music, with electronics, with electronic equipment, but are also using their voices, because I kind of feel like there's this societal push towards women using their voices as a means of musical expression. Do you ever consider that? And do you think that your music is perceived in a different way because you use your voice in it, as opposed to when you don't? Go to both of you, if you don't mind.
Well, Want to take that on first, Jennifer?
Wow, yeah, Kate, hi. It's so good to see you here.
Likewise,
Even
likewise.
in this space, in the
Yeah,
not actually
yeah,
see you.
totally.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I guess because I mean, intuitive is complicated to say the word, to say that it's intuitive. I feel for me that it's using my voice is an intuitive instrument for me and has been, because I haven't really played instruments before, and even when I was started producing with, I guess, electronic music, I always use my voice because of um, yes, it being just my most accessible acoustic I don't know, expressive tool, I guess, and because of my love of various types of vocals of various singers. I think singing is something I've always found I've just been really drawn to. So I don't. It's yeah. I mean, I haven't really thought about. I haven't when I try and make music and when I try and approach music, I more try and focus on what I'm like intuitively drawn towards, or like where I feel like where my heart soars, or what thrills me, how I can use my voice, or how the voice can be used. So yeah, it's not I guess I don't know if that answers your question. It's always felt like an
Well,
intuitive
it
thing
does.
for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does in the sense that I think it's really great to hear that you're not actually thinking about all of these societal, factors and pushes and pulls and things, and that you're just going with whatever it's you, and that's kind of what we want from our artists, right? But yeah, I was just wondering if you were conscious of those things going on around you.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard not like. Yeah, it's undeniable. Like all of the general kind of male dominance in electronic, and all just kind of in all forms of electronic music and music in general, I guess. But I yeah yeah yeah, I don't know. I guess I've thought about it. Yeah, I've thought about it, but I'm just feel really comfortable. I feel comfortable using my voice, and I mean, it's obviously there's a huge imbalance there. So yeah, it's definitely crept up, especially in earlier years. When I started out trying to find different kind of sources of inspiration, we were just trying to find more women. My
Yeah.
first experiences of electronic music production. But yeah, what about you, Jen? That's definitely
Yeah,
part of your
I've
approach.
definitely thought about it or think about it. I didn't actually use voice for a long time, and it was really total lack of confidence in that sense. So for me, it's actually been an experience of finding the confidence to do that, and I've become. I think part of that, a huge part of that, actually, is that I've become really drawn to vulnerability and finding that as a way to really deeply connect. And more so, I think about it I think about it in all aspects of life, to be honest, but a lot of the time in performance. So I'll design performance pieces that I think are really, really difficult, really a real big challenge for me to perform. And sometimes I wonder, why on earth am I doing this myself? But it feels like because it's a way that I feel I need to grow. So writing, using the voice and presenting it in such a vulnerable space where you hear breaking, you hear all of these things that might be considered wrong in other circumstances, is really empowering for me through kind of a shared vulnerability, I think. that's certainly how I feel about it now. But you know, you could ask me in a year's time, and I'll say that was terrible. I shouldn't do that anymore.
Oh, that's
think that's
fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks for that great question. I think that's probably a great place to leave it. And I think I just want to thank both of you, Jennifer and Jen. And it's so great to have you here and being able to listen to you talk about your work and your thoughts and actually hear some of your work. So thank you very much. I'm going to suggest that we all turn off our megaphones, have a little wander to the disco, and then we can have sneaky conversations in the corner if we want to. No, everybody can't hear everybody. So let's turn off our megaphones and we can go for a little wander. And, you know, pour yourself a glass of wine at home if you can. Thank you, everybody.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks, Joe. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, so much.
Hey, follow me. Megaphones off.
Thanks, guys. That was great.
Thanks, Emil.
So interesting. I'd love to see you live now. I can't wait to see a live show.
Ah, come on, this way.
Yeah,
This
same.
way.
Jennifer, let us know when you've got gigs, because we're all going to be there.
Yeah. Oh, God.
The more Americans kind of come in,
But actually,
Yeah,
you get
yeah,
the
I
audience
know.
really.
there's like basically four
No, I
stereo
know.
pairs.
Glad we've got a few 8
but
o'clocks anyway,
But
you know.
actually, what happened was you
Oh.
just
Yeah.
lost the whole image
Right.
and everything.
All learning. All good.
And everything
Yeah.
seemed
I'll see
like
you
it
later.
came from everywhere. So that's why I changed it. So instead of like even as a circle, it would have went 1, 7, 2. So instead, the configuration then goes 1, 2. So those pairs are much closer together. But normally, I would probably prefer to put those out. But yeah, it's just I found it interesting to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting as well.
And it's so much more immersive though here than it would be in in an octaphonic setup in a room, like, so because you have the room and you have the room sound, whereas I'm just on headphones, so I don't have all that room sound. So it actually is quite intense, like much more intense than I thought. So maybe I probably wouldn't have made I was a bit embarrassed kind of making like this really beat heavy stuff, but I really wanted it to be a bit cheesy and fun as well.
No, it's cool. I really like it. And I'm glad that there was something kind of made for the space as well, because a lot of stuff I was fighting against the space to get things in. So it's kind of nice to I mean, obviously, ideally, I'd say if with like loads of time, it'd be nice to get more stuff that's kind of designed with VR in mind, as opposed to kind of trying to showcase tasters of stuff that would probably be best designed for a real world.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I think if I was doing it again now, then I would just do different things that I've learned from going through this process. So that's that's really good, because it's just so hard to know how things will work. So I said that I tested it in Mozilla Hubs first and going like, how would this work? And then like the files didn't play anywhere near at the same time. So it's like, okay, this
I
is
tried. I initially wanted to do stuff with Hubs as well, and it's not really made for that. But I mean, this isn't either, but this has a lot of more leeway. But I think, obviously the fact that we're trying to do it social, if you were doing something without the networking need, you could have so much more size to play with. You know, it's just the fact that everyone's streaming everything, so just to get people to be able to even access it on all these different headsets and devices and everything. I see Joe's over there looking at the rain.
The rain's great. I think I walked past a few times. I was like, is that raining?
Yeah, there's some fish in the air as well. But towards the end, people were saying, would you maybe want to take out those things? I said, no, no, they're only tiny. I'm not taking those out.
It looks like she might be having an existential crisis.
Joe, are you
right,
contemplating the rain, or are you just are you there? Okay, that was good.
That looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jen is so articulate about her practice, and it makes me so excited, like, for continuing to try and work in these areas. Just to know that there's so much growth that's still to come, and so much learning to be done, and like in doing something, you look back in a year or two and you find you learn something.
Some people talk, but what they say can hold me back. Break down on me, bring it back. Take it slow, bring it back to where you want to go. Give me the love.